Chapter 222-223. The House of Confucius, the ancestral home of the Kong family in the past. In the previous episode, Mr. Li had come to this era to meet Miss Kong Man. After their conversation, she returned home and was scolded by the old man and the elders. On the ground, there was a picture of Mr. Li with a caption. Then, from nowhere, a jar or something fell right on the picture, distorting it. The jar shattered into many pieces and there was an old man with silver hair pointing at Miss Kong Man, who was kneeling. He loudly proclaimed that it was a sin, a real sin. "Look at yourself," he said. "Look at all this. Did I give you a camera just to take pictures of that wild man? And are you two going to ruin our family traditions? Speak up." The girl lowered her head slightly and said that he wasn't. The old man seemed surprised and asked her to repeat herself. She looked at him and loudly stated that she said he wasn't a wild man. Hearing this, the old man became even angrier and gritted his teeth. Pointing at her, he said, "Look at what you're saying. Are you defying me to protect an outsider? I bought you that camera to take pictures of landscapes, not to take pictures of a man and then defy me. I shouldn't have cooperated with your mother to give birth to a child like you. Look at yourself. Are you not ashamed in front of the elders of our clan?" The girl just closed her eyes as if she were a wooden block, listening to his words like the sound of cicadas. Then he changed his tone and said, "My daughter, listen to me. Since ancient times, children's marriages have been decided by their parents and matchmakers. Moreover, I feel that it was much better back then than it is now. Also, young Master Du saw you taking pictures and chatting happily with a man by the river. Although he didn't say anything when he saw you with another man, where can we put our family's face because of this? People will say that our daughter is playing with strange men even though she is engaged." Then voices came from behind him saying, "Enough. Stop shouting or saying anything more, it's giving me a headache. If outsiders hear this, it's really disgraceful. I've been saying for a long time that women shouldn't be allowed to study. This has been the case since our parents' time. If you still have ambitions, will you continue to resist?" Then he sat in the middle and simply said that it was an unfortunate thing for our family. Our family is really unfortunate. It would be better to send her back to the countryside as soon as possible. There are some elders there who will surely be personally taught by some of our village elders. Letting her stay here wanting to study in their era where women are not allowed to study and gender discrimination exists is not right." Continuing with the story, two people came in from outside, an old man and a young man. The old man said, "Oh my goodness. Why are some old people in the family so angry?" The young man saw Miss Kong Man kneeling and asked her curiously why she was kneeling there. She turned around and said his name, Van Dao. Then he walked over to Miss Kong Man's grandfather's side and said, "Brother, I'm not talking about you, relax. I don't know what big thing happened that made all the elders in this family so alert. I tell you this, if you make them angry for whatever reason, you will be responsible for it." Immediately after, there was a loud scream, "You traitor, you unfilial person! How dare you come here and speak these sarcastic words? I remember you were the one who talked about studying abroad to serve the country and broaden your own horizons. Now, look at what has happened to this child, this girl, when she was fascinated by the study you mentioned. Thanks to you, that little girl has completely forgotten all the rules passed down by our ancestors. How can such a person face all the ancestral sects after death? What era is it now? Your thinking is too outdated. Are you arrogant, you traitor? You dare to lie here and cause public confusion as a clan leader. You should clarify your position." Hearing the old patriarch say this, the father of the girl, Kong Man, as the heir of the Kong family, currently had to make a decision and respect his elders. He closed his eyes in silence for a moment and then said, "I agree with the elders' point of view. Family tradition does not tolerate disrespect." Hearing him say this, Kong Man's daughter loudly said, "Father, this is no longer the old era. There are no rules that women are not allowed to study or take pictures with others. Immediately after the girl finished speaking, she was slapped hard by her old father. The girl was stunned when she was hit by her father just because she wanted to become a special woman. That is pursuing a dream. The girl held her painful face and turned her back to leave. The old man behind her blurted out that the unfilial daughter was blinded by that damn thing. Tonight, you go and kneel before the ancestors to repent. Tomorrow morning, go with me to apologize to young Master Du so that he is satisfied. The girl heard this and turned back and said, "Father, stop talking. I want to cancel my engagement with young Master Du. If you like him, go marry him yourself. I also want to open a school exclusively for girls. Women also need to be respected and allowed to study and pursue what they want." He was extremely angry when he heard his daughter say this. "So now I will kill you before you create karma," he said, and raised his hand intending to hit the girl again. But he felt something. Someone next to him stopped him. It was Mr. Lee, who had gotten tired of watching the drama and didn't know where to intervene. He came out and grabbed the old man's wrist. The old man was confused and flustered. Kong Man's daughter saw Mr. Lee appear here and was very surprised. The girl looked at Mr. Lee and said loudly, "I really can't stand it anymore." The old man, her father, still didn't understand what was going on. He muttered to himself who Mr. Lee was. Why is he so handsome with smooth white skin? This person has been waiting since when? He is exactly like the person in that picture. This is the first time seeing such a perfect human being from the future. So they felt confused, as if he was not from this world. So everyone was sweating coldly, no one said anything. Then Mr. Lee also said, "Master Kong, I didn't expect you to look quite strong and sturdy inside. But you have a very rotten brain, instead of turning into a decaying zombie, dying slowly over time. Why don't you sacrifice your life to benefit the people?" Hearing these words, the authoritative and firm voice of Mr. Lee made the old man scared and sweaty. As for his daughter, Kong Man's girl, hearing Mr. Lee say this, she was very shocked and helpless. The girl said, "Mr. Lee, you can't. And Mr. Lee then concluded, "You will feel rotten." Mr. Lee has the ability to control time and human lifespan, so the girl helplessly watched. As for the others, who were suddenly surprised by Mr. Lee's sudden appearance and then saying such things, they had not had time to react. Mr. Lee used the time watch to invade his body, causing him to fly up with the glowing effect of the watch. Kong Man's girl said, "No way, Mr. Lee is going to kill him, isn't he?" Until he was tortured by Mr. Lee, using time to attack his body, making his eyes glow yellow and his face gradually wrinkling and aging. As for the old people, also known as the elders of the Kong family, seeing their grandson like this was very surprising and scary. Mr. Lee frowned a little angrily and was thinking something about Kong Man's girl, and the two people behind seeing this were both stunned, looking at it with wide eyes, open mouths, sweating coldly. As for the old father of the girl, he opened his mouth wide as if he wanted to scream but couldn't make a sound. The girl saw her father like this and was very worried. She couldn't help but call out, "Father." The golden light of time, the light of life, shone outside. Then that light suddenly went out, everything around returned to normal, no longer swallowed by light. As for the old father of Kong Man's girl, fell to the ground, collapsed, knees touching the ground. Did he die? Mr. Lee sighed a bit, then adjusted his tie. Kong Man's girl quickly came to check on her old father. "Father, are you okay?" He was still breathing heavily. Seeing her worried attitude like this, Mr. Lee also stepped forward and said, "Don't worry, I should have drained all his lifespan so that he would die. But thinking about it again, I gave it back." The girl was confused hearing this and just looked at Mr. Lee without saying anything. Mr. Lee smiled cunningly, looking at him, then said, "I just let him feel what it feels like to die of old age." "And how do you feel? After all, isn't it Master Kong who likes the feeling of manipulating other people's lives?" Likes arranging people's lives according to his own will? If occasionally he experiences being controlled by others, maybe he can empathize with that, right? He heard me say this and also tried to open his mouth with a scared, sweaty face falling apart, saying, "You are a demon." Then, someone behind Mr. Lee spoke up. "Although my elder brother is a bit conservative and patriarchal, he is open-minded." Initially, I supported and encouraged him to go out more and broaden his horizons to look outside. Of course, about my niece, little man, I also always support her decision not to marry. At least she can't just marry anyone she doesn't like, right? As long as my niece speaks up, I can fully support any photo exhibition or school that she requests. Kong Man's girl was very surprised to hear him say this, looked at him and said, "Uncle too." Then, Mr. Lee also asked him, "Can you take responsibility?" He heard this and also put his hand on his hip, then looked at the three old predecessors. "I think now they have no more objections." The three of them heard this and just frowned, angry expressions, but dared not yell a word. Then, Mr. Lee looked around and noticed a young man behind him. Uncle two of Man, the young man also noticed that Mr. Lee was looking at him, so he also said that Kong Van's son seemed very talented and good at finance, right? He was surprised to hear Mr. Lee say this and said, "This kid is really good. How did you know about this?" Mr. Lee heard him say this. Mr. Lee also adjusted his glasses, then muttered, "As a businessman, time walks on a long river. Of course, I know everything about the future." Then, Mr. Lee smiled and said to them, "Not only that. What I know is that this young man will definitely become the head of the Kong family. Could it be Van Dao who brought the photo saying that my niece will be single until old age?" Hearing Mr. Lee say this, the old man of Kong Man's girl quickly sat up, dusted his butt off and loudly said, "This is a joke. As the head of the family always has high demands." "Yes," he continued, "it's just a childish trick." After he finished speaking, he realized that it was not right, that is not known since when. Mr. Lee had stood behind him. Mr. Lee opened his mouth to speak, which made him startled and sweaty. Mr. Lee said, "I feel like this reflects Master Kong's open attitude towards his younger generation here. This is what makes a progressive and advanced homeowner, isn't it? Or do you have some other idea?" He was now trembling with fear, swallowing hard, then opened his mouth to say, No, he didn't listen to him say that. Mr. Lee also happily turned his back and walked away. "Very good. If nothing else happens, then it's time for me to leave." Then, Mr. Lee walked in front of Van Dao's young man. He saw Mr. Lee looking worried and confused, sweating coldly. Then he realized that Mr. Lee had patted his shoulder. Perhaps because of his future identity as an old man holding a photo looking for Mr. Lee, so Mr. Lee left an even more impressive impression, stacking on top of each other. Then, Mr. Lee smiled brightly, saying, "Will we meet again and see you in another 100 years? For them it's 100 years, but when Mr. Lee returns it's at most a few days." 100 years later, then Mr. Lee walked away muttering, "History has been changed a bit by me, ha? Not to mention that I did something to prevent history from being changed by my appearance, like insurance measures. However, there have been fluctuations in this period. Will the Kong family Van Dao, who will be the head of the Kong family in the future, also receive it? This has changed history." This video ends here. Thank you everyone for watching.